welcome again. My name is Joshua and I'm the moderator for this session, session 1A. And today we have 5 presentations, and next to me there are 4 presenters, and the 5th presenter is actually going to be presenting from Zoom. Presenting from Zoom, yes. So we have CORONEL from NFSA, and we have Ezra CRUZ from the LaSalle University, Manila. We have Joshua Harris from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And we have Sukanta from India. That's right. And also Nick and Amanda from University of Melbourne and University of Sydney. That will be the presentation from Zoom. So without further ado, we're going to have Rebecca from NFSA to give us our presentation. Just a quick word about Rebecca. Rebecca is she heads the collection preservation branch of NFSA, National Film and Sound Archive Australia. She joined NFSA in 2018, initially leading property strategy, and now coordinates functions that ensure the preservation and digitization of the collection. So, Rebecca, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for the warm welcome this morning. This paper is about NFSA, so National Film and Sound Archive of Australia's journey to improve our discoverability of our national audiovisual collection using an AI tool, an artificial intelligence tool. We're just at the beginning of that particular journey, so this is a presentation about some of the things that we've learned along the way implementing an artificial intelligence and machine learning system with our collection. A little bit about me. I'm not really an archivist. I come from a background of working in national collections. I spent 16 years at the National Museum of Australia. My key role at the Film and Sound Archive is collection preservation, so looking after the physical collection, its digitisation and its conservation. Artificial intelligence is a really popular topic at the moment, and I should point out that a lot of what I'm talking about is actually machine learning rather than artificial intelligence, but it's all related. And recently in the press you've seen a lot about ChatGPT, about a very common AI system at the moment. So it's becoming a topic that a lot of people are interested in and seeing how they can use it to interrogate and hopefully discover their collections. And it's a particularly useful tool for audiovisual collections. Just a little bit about the National Film and Sound Archive. So this is our building in Canberra, Australia. As I just mentioned, we have last night just been very lucky recipients of the biggest funding boost in 40 years. So we are very, very pleased and lucky to be funded by our federal government. We just received $34 million Australian dollars over the next 4 years, in addition to $40 million that we received 2 years ago to help digitise our collection. So for once we can say that the Australian government is funding the arts and culture, which is absolutely fantastic. The institution was founded in this building in 1984, and we are one of the earliest audiovisual archives in the world. And our collection numbers over 4 million items, so that's why discoverability is so important for us. Around half of our collection is physical, the other half is digital, and it's quite a broad collection. So we have film. We have some of the earliest Australian-made film. So, for example, here is a Sentimental Bloke 1919, a film that we've also restored in recent years. We've got Australian classics like Gurus Weddings, and we also collect contemporary Australian film. All government-funded films in Australia are largely donated to us or deposited with us. Our digital collection is around 7 petabytes in size, so there's a lot of data being generated, and we hold 3 copies of that collection for disaster recovery. In the next few years, we have been set up with enough data storage for around 27 petabytes of data for our digitalisation program. Our physical collection is in 5 different buildings in Canberra. As mentioned, we do have a big collection of documents, costumes, props, designs, all kinds of material from film and TV. The example here is a dress from Moulin Rouge, Baz Luhrmann film. And recently, for instance, we collected a lot of costumes, about 200 costumes from Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. So we do continue to collect physical items. We have a large radio and sound collection. We capture radio off air. And this is an area where machine learning is particularly interesting for us in terms of transcribing radio. But we also have a collection of radio on disc, tape, and other formats. We report quite a lot of oral history, so our team goes out and interviews people with long and outstanding careers in the visual aspects in Australia. We report and keep those oral histories. We have extensive sound collections of all kinds, including published music, live performances, speeches, and also we have quite a large and significant collection of our First Nations communities speaking in their own languages, which is an area that we're trying to delve into and discover more. You can see here we also have a large number of materials in our warehouses. We have quite a lot of broadcast TV. Recently we collected all of the episodes of Australian Classic, Neighbours, 6,000 TV episodes. So we continue to bring in magnetic tape into the collection as well. And then finally, we've just branched out into video games. The image here is from Untitled Goose Game, Australian video game. Gaming is now a large industry that feature films are, so it's important for us as an AV archive to collect what is being used in contemporary Australia. So, how did that lead us to artificial intelligence? One of the key issues for all archives is how do you research and how do you discover material in your collections so that you can use it to tell the stories that you want to tell. And those stories change over time. The way in which material might have been described and catalogued 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago is likely to be entirely different to how you want to tell the stories now. So we, like most archives, have 2 traditional forms of that information. One is the catalogue. In our case, we use Bibliographic. Our skilled accessioners will look at an item coming into the collection. They will put in all the technical format information. They will look at length, quality, what conservation needs there might be, and they'll put in a description of the item. Now, our accessioners are pretty good, but it's impossible to describe every element of every piece of AV that comes into your collection. Something like oral histories is an example where you might sit down and talk to someone for 2 or 3 days about their career and their life. You can't possibly summarise that in a catalogue report. The other thing, of course, is we rely on our humans, our staff, and their incredible expertise. So we have a fabulous staff body who have got expertise across a wide range of topics. They've been working in the industry for a long time. But of course, it's hard sometimes to get that information out of individual people, or they might go to another job, or something might happen there, and it's not an easily accessible form of knowledge in some ways. So, we're really keen therefore to look at what machine learning and artificial intelligence can do for us. This is Curio, which is a product that we bought for our pilot test. We wanted to look at what this kind of system do for the collection, and really we didn't want to go public with this. We just wanted to see what it would do for our staff in particular, and what kind of lessons we could learn about the good points and the not so good points of using machine learning. So just a few points on how that went internally within the organisation. We're an organisation of about 180 people. We range across different departments, curatorial, accessioning, We have an ICT department that's quite large with digital-driven business. And in terms of one of our first lessons in this project is really that we need to spend more time actually understanding what we want the tool to do and who's going to lead that project. So if we had our time again, we probably would spend more time at the beginning of the project talking between our technical people and our curatorial teams and our engagement teams and actually understand why we wanted this particular kind of search tool. We actually found some pretty simple but really quite complex problems with the actual technology as well. So one of the problems with this particular system is that all of our access copies of our collection are time-coded. They're time-coded so that we provide them to people who would like to access them for other uses. They know which portion of the content they're looking for. Unfortunately, when you run optical character recognition over that film, it constantly picked up the time code as something that it needed to record. So the system was just constantly outputting the time code into the system. So we had to go back and create entirely new copies of our access collection without the time code. Not something that we actually thought would happen. One of the other kind of things that we didn't really think about in great detail before we started this process was that having this kind of search function allows you to jump right into the content. So in my case, for instance, I'm not an expert in our collection database, which requires key search terms and knowing exactly what you're asking for and how you're looking for it. This tool, however, someone like me can pop straight in whatever search term I like, and it will bring back results. This means that sometimes it's bringing back content results that I might not expect. So that material could be in some way offensive, it could be racist, it could be using language that we don't consider appropriate. We have material in our collection that under the Australian classification sphere is either X rated or R rated. So we have to go through a whole different process of deciding how we will compartmentalise certain parts of our collection so that you don't just have it on a unity curio. And it's a surprisingly difficult kind of issue to deal with in terms of that really quick access to collection material. One of the other things that we had to look at too was about our reputation in terms of our knowledge and our accuracy in our collection. Everything is constantly moderated, it has quality controls on it. With a system like this, you're getting back search results that haven't had that level of moderation. So spelling mistakes come through, misreading of particular characters leading to completely different interpretations of content. At its rawest level, it is not to any kind of expert filter other than what the machine can do and what you tell the machine to do. So it's been quite challenging for some of our expert staff to realise that that's okay, that the first time the machine looks at the content, it's going to make mistakes, and that's just part of the process. Another thing, of course, is that AI systems and machine learning systems are contextual to the place that they're created or made. The particular product that we're using, Kr, is American, and therefore its learning, its internal intelligence is based on American examples. Football is an example we use. It recognises certain types of American football. It doesn't recognise Australian football, but it comes down to words and different aspects of culture that you wouldn't necessarily expect a machine to understand. It's an interesting challenge for everyone in terms of how you teach machines this global use of information. We're working with our colleagues at the moment in the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. They've taught their archiving tool all about Australian place names, which can be quite tricky. So, when we're talking about Mullumbimby or sorry, I'm not loud enough. There's a lot of things for a machine to learn. But here are some examples in terms of what Curio and what machine learning can do in the collection. So here is facial recognition. So in our collection, we've typed in Russell Crowe, famous Australian actor. And across the side there you can see images of Russell, although there's potentially one in that group that is not Russell. So by doing this, the machine learning system can run through all of our content and identify where it thinks it's found Russell Crowe, and it will show it to you, and you can then teach the machine which of these is Russell and which is not. This is very useful where you might have actors or performers who are credited at the beginning of their careers, or who might have popped up in cameos and things like that. Well, it's not going to be in the main catalogue, but facial recognition can find them. It is interesting though, sometimes it does get it wrong, so you do have to tell it which one is Russell Crowe. At the moment in Curio, in our system, we have about 4,500 people identified, but we can continue to add them in. All you need to do to add in a person is to have enough images that show them from different angles, and the system will learn to identify them. The other thing that Curio does for us is that it can do voice to text. So again, it takes the entire content from any piece and converts that into text, which is searchable. This is an example of a famous speech by one of Australia's former Prime Ministers, who said, "I did but see her passing by, yet I love her till I die." We thought we had that in the collection, but we didn't know, and we did not have the time to search through multiple pieces of audio. Curio found that immediately by transcribing that. Another area that we are finding a lot of interesting content is material that is being created through amateurs, so home movies are a large part of our collection, and they're a very interesting part of our collection because they show Australian culture, sort of domestic lives, people's parties and birthdays and events and significant activities, but they're generally not catalogued in any great detail. And Curio will find all kinds of things in the content that helps you identify it. So we have an example here of a home movie. This particular family travelled through Southeast Asia. They used Qantas airline brochures as their intertitles, so Curio can find different pieces of content by looking at that text. The other great benefit of Curio is that when you search for those terms, and you get a marker on the screen and you can skip directly to that content without having to watch or listen to all of the other content preceding it. It also allows us to teach it changes in language, changes in how words are spelt. We all are very aware that anglicised spellings of words that might be okay. So we also have the capacity, for instance, to add additional spellings of words into our system. The image here is from the 1940s Frank Hurley film. These films, again, typically have anglicised versions of place names that may not be considered accurate, but for us to search the content, we need to know what those are. The other really fascinating part of machine learning is this optical character recognition. So here's an example on the screen here where we ask the system to look at the concept of equal pay. This is a former Prime Minister. Right up in the corner you can see in the text, in the background, is the words equal pay. The actual words in this particular recorded speech doesn't include reference to equal pay at all, but it's in the background. So in terms of a researcher looking for particular topics, this is a gold mine of information because it takes you beyond what is actually being catalogued. This is another example. This is a film around the life of First Nations man Bill Onus. It's a 40-minute long documentary. Again, the words equal pay show on a handwritten banner. Again, that would never show up in a catalogue record. It's not significant enough in that context. No one ever went through a catalogue to that extent, but Curio can find these examples in a matter of seconds. the end of this year to the 100th anniversary of radio, our curators can now go through and create content lists in Curio, our collection database won't let them do that. It's another example of posters. And finally, just to wrap up, this is an image that was actually created by the ChatGPT system, DALI 2, when one of our curators asked it to create an image of an oil painting of the AV archive of the future. This is what AI can do. It can create things, it can be creative, it can look to content, but it's also an incredible tool for all of our collections. It is becoming more popular, it's becoming more affordable, it's becoming more intelligent, and certainly from our point of view, it's something that is going to massively change the way that we access our collection, and over time it will massively change the way the public can access our collection. We will continue to trial the process internally. We are developing new collection tools, we're developing a new way for the public to search the collection, we're developing new ways for our clients and our donors to donate material directly to us through an online system. All of these things in the future will interact with machine learning and AI. It's inevitable, and from our point of view, it will massively change our collection information and all of the data that we have on our collection. It's just one tool though, it's not going to solve everything, but certainly from our staff's point of view, it's been a very interesting and enlightening way of looking at the collection. It's certainly opened up portions of the collection that have been hidden for a long time, and we look forward to sharing and talking to our colleagues around the world about how machine learning is working for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. How much time do we have for question and answers? Okay. Any questions from the audience? Artificial intelligence, so I imagine there will be lots and lots of questions. Maybe I'll ask one question. If you can share, how much does it cost to have like a Curio system?
That's a very good question. This version of artificial intelligence or machine learning is not cheap. It's tens of thousands of dollars to implement. The bigger cost really is around the companies that service it and provide it and update it. What we are finding, we chose this particular product, it was a fairly mid-range product, if I can put it that way. But what we're finding now is there's a lot more open source forms of machine learning, there's a lot more collaboration. The example, for instance, with our national broadcaster, they're going to share their AI system with us. So as it becomes more common and more popular, it will become cheaper. But like a lot of the technology, it starts out more expensive and will become more accessible. I'm not sure whether it will, those kind of products will never be completely affordable, but there will be different ways of accessing the same kinds of systems.
I think you did AI for audio and also image detection. Did you develop any tools for image processing, cleaning, restoring them, making pristine quality, like removing dust automatically from the image, scratches or dirt, dust, removing them in AI? Image process. Cleaning the images, you have dirt and dust in the image. Did you develop any tools for that in AI to clean them automatically?
Sorry, do you want to come forward for me?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of feedback going forward.
So image processing, when you have dust and dirt in the image, can be cleaned through AI automatically. Any scanning dust in the image. Once you scan the image, you need to clean the restore, right? The footage. Do you develop any tools, AI tools for image processing?
So the question is whether there is ways of cleaning the
Dirt, dust in the image.
kind of cleaning up the image.
Image.
Through. Not in this particular system. So this system relies on reasonable quality, not high resolution necessarily, but reasonable quality resolution of images going into the system. So for this particular trial for us, we used the material that we had already digitised and that we had already done post-production or conservation work on. So everything's of reasonable quality. So this particular product won't do that kind of cleaning or image quality work. You need to do that to a certain extent before machine learning can run over the top of it. The main thing, of course, is it needs to be able to see what you're looking for. So if it's optical character recognition, it needs to get the quality of that character. But as you can see from my examples, when they're handwritten or in the background, it doesn't have to be great. It just has to be able to see it.
Thank you, Mark.
I was just told that there is a Q&A session at the end, so we're going to move on to the next presentation. We have Ezra CRUZ, and he's the Academic Service Faculty and Media Librarian of the Salle University Libraries, and he manages the multimedia collection, digital institutional repository, and library discovery service platform of the DLSU libraries. He has over a decade of experience working as an academic librarian in various areas such as collection development, research support services, library media technology, and library systems management. He finished both his bachelor's and master's degree in library and information science at the University of Philippines, Diliman. Luis, for yours.
Thank you for that introduction. You can hear me clearly. It's still Zoom, but we're now face to face. We're really grateful for technology, but it's still great. We are here together. Again, good morning everyone, and happy to be with you in this morning's conference in Pattaya. Sawadee Kap. And also would like to thank the SEAPAVAA organizing committee for accepting and allowing my presentation to be shared to you, all of you this morning. I am extremely honored and honored to share my presentation to all of you entitled Audiovisual Collections in the Digital Commons Network Best Practices and Future Directions. So about me, I am Ezra. My current role, actually I'm not an archivist, I'm an academic librarian. I'm a digital librarian of the Salle University Libraries in the Philippines. I handle the media collection of the university library, which includes the audiovisual materials as well as the multimedia database subscriptions. Also, I'm in charge of the institutional repository, which I'll discuss later, and I'm also in charge of the discovery service platform of the university library. Here is my topic outline for my presentation. Basically, I touched on these 5 points. In my introduction, I'll discuss what is the Digital Commons Network, as well as Animal Repository, our university's own institutional repository. I will also talk about the roles and impact of IRs, or institutional repositories, in the research and scholarship landscape, as well as the relevance of audiovisual materials, as well in the research landscape. And then I'll present some of the best practices in managing and presenting audiovisual collections in the digital commons network. Then I'll move on to discuss some of the issues and risks that are worth considering when managing AV collections in the network. And lastly, I'll present some of my recommendations for future consideration with regards to hosting of audiovisual materials in IRs. A brief background about what is the Digital Commons Network. The Digital Commons Network, or DC Network, is an aggregate of all open access items in all digital commons institutional repositories worldwide. It brings together free, full-text scholarly materials in various formats from hundreds of universities and colleges and even other institutions worldwide. With open access to resources as it's one of its goals, researchers can readily access and download full-text copies of materials in various types of formats online. And streaming and viewing of documents, materials, online and offline, is likewise available in repositories belonging to the network. It is hosted by Digital Commons, previously Bpress. It is a commercial institutional repository platform founded by researchers and academics. It is managed and maintained by librarians and IR managers from universities and institutions worldwide. And materials are carefully curated before being hosted in the platform. And this includes peer-reviewed materials such as journal articles, datasets, books, audiovisual materials, conference proceedings, and other more types of materials. So how does a member of the network benefit from Digital Commons Network? Each member institution has their own Digital Commons repository site. And within their respective Digital Commons sites, users of member institutions can search and retrieve full-text materials within their own repository. And they can likewise search the whole Digital Commons network of repositories via the Search All Repositories feature. Once they find materials that they want to access, they can readily download the contents of IRs within the whole network. More than 600 institutions are growing, including my parent institution, the Salle University, subscribe and use Digital Commons to preserve and promote their intellectual output and expertise. And just a brief background of my home institution, the Salle University, or DLSU, is a leading learner-centered and research university in the Philippines and in the ASEAN region. It is an internationally recognized Catholic educational institution founded by the Brothers of Christian Schools, or the De La Salle Brothers, in 1911. And the university is a hub for higher education training, renowned for its academic excellence, prolific and relevant research, and involved community service. Its campus is located in Taft Avenue, Manila, the capital city of Philippines. Meanwhile, our repository, our digital institutional repository in DLSU, it serves as the central locus of scholarly and creative works of faculty, students, and researchers of the university. It's still a relatively new platform. We only launched it last October 2020 during the height of the pandemic. And DLSU, being a research-focused university, acquired the annual repository with a long-term goal to help raise the research reputation of the university by making its outputs more discoverable, visible, and accessible to the global research community. As an institutional repository belonging to the Digital Commons Network, it likewise reaps the benefits brought about by the platform, such as increase in reach, visibility, and discoverability. And various types of outputs are housed in the repository, including faculty works, electronic thesis and dissertations, archival and special collections, and many more types of materials. And the main benefits for us of the platform is it is fully cloud hosted. It offers unlimited storage, which is a big plus for us. Custom branding and flexible workflows. We have a dedicated support from the platform, and it is continuously being developed with new updates from time to time. On to the next part of my talk, I'll be discussing the roles of IRs in research and scholarship. IRs, or institutional repositories, represent critical infrastructure for open science and open scholarship. Open access brings positive impact for research community as it helps democratize access to materials without restrictions, while helping bring out authors to the community as more and more people were able to see and read their research work. Here I categorize the roles of IRs in research and scholarship into three. First is roles specific to the institution or university. IRs can greatly increase research, visibility, and discoverability of materials since it is centrally managing all institutional resources in one portal. Second, IRs, like what I pointed a while ago, the centralization and storage of all types of output in one location. This can also include unpublished literature that may likewise not be available or lost if it's not stored in the repository. Next, IRs play also a crucial role in standardizing institutional records. This includes maintaining consistent metadata and descriptive information about each item in the repository, making it easier for search retrieval and access. Fourth, IRs also provide valuable data for tracking and analyzing research performance, which is very important in research universities. Data on downloads and views can be used to evaluate the impact of research, plan future research strategies, and aid in decision-making processes. And finally, IRs also break down publishers' cost and permission barriers, given that it is open access in nature. Roles specific to authors, wider dissemination of scholarship and impact. Some studies have estimated that open access articles are cited 50 to 250% more than non-open access articles. And in some disciplines, online files receive on average 300% more citations than materials available only in paper format. Also, Google Scholar gives preferential treatment to materials in IRs, and a paper picked up from an IR will appear higher up in the Google results list. Second and third, actually it's connected. Storage and access, and also able to build researchers' profile. Many authors lack time, resource, or expertise to ensure preservation of their scholarly work. Through an organizationally based IR strategy, long-term accessibility and greater security of work is assured. And research items get permanent URL compared to just storing it in their personal or departmental website. And added value services such as, again, document-level analytics are also great features. As for roles of IR specific to the society and community, first, just what I already pointed out, it can play a role in making research outputs available free of charge to a wider audience. Second, IRs help facilitate faster research production. Third, just what I also talked about in the earlier slide, IRs promote preservation and long-term access to research outputs. And lastly, specifically those in the DC network, can help reduce the dependence on the traditional pay-per-view mode of scholarly publishing. So I would also like to emphasize the importance of audiovisual materials in research. Audiovisual, multimedia, and mixed media materials are more complex resources when used in research and scholarship compared to the text-based sources. The availability of such collections in research is very important as it can capture and present the nuances and subtleties of social interaction, which makes them very valuable resource to researchers in various fields. And as a result, it is crucial that these resources are well represented and widely available to repositories, online catalogs, databases, and discovery services of libraries and other institutions. On this part of my presentation, I will be showing some of the best practices in managing AV collections in IRs belonging to the Digital Commons network. In the interest of time, I'll just be presenting a handful of examples that I think very useful and that can be replicated by other IRs. On that example, my first example of best practices from York University, where they set up a request link to have a copy of images in their IR that is accessible using assistive technology. The second example, hosting of a podcast collection in these institutional repositories. A handful of institutions in the network have been doing this now. Some have their podcast collection uploaded to their IR and made it available via the native player of the platform, while also some use third-party tools and websites to embed their podcast in their sites. In my example here, podcast series both hosted by Columbia Law School are not only available online but also downloadable and playable offline via the download button. Okay. Podcast branded as Rebelcast, hosted by Dominican University of California, also made their podcast downloadable for offline listening, in addition to it being available online via the native audio player. Also hosted by Dominican University of California IR, the podcast collection is uploaded via SoundCloud, a third-party music streaming service, but it is being available in the repository by embedding it via embedding. The University of Central Florida also makes use of their IR to host podcasts produced by their academic community. On my next best practice example, some institutions make use of the platform to present their audiovisual collections as digital gallery exhibits. First example is from Andrews University. As you can see here, they use the platform to showcase some of their digital collections, in this case, photo galleries from their School of Urban Design. Presentation of audiovisual collections, such as this example, using the gallery exhibit feature greatly enhances the user experience, and browsing these collections via the feature is really intuitive for users. Salle University in the US also used the digital gallery exhibit feature of the platform to promote their image collections in their art museum. And also Jacksonville State University also hosts their art and design digital galleries collection in the IR. University of North Florida also hosts their art exhibit galleries in their repository. And all of my examples do not just show these exhibits in their IR. These files are fully downloadable to the users who want to download it in their devices. On my next example, IRs hosted in Digital Commons platform also uses this feature a lot more now, which is using their IR as repository of video faculty and teaching outputs such as lecture series and teaching resources. Just what I said a while ago, they do take advantage of the unlimited storage feature of the platform. Here in my example, Chulalongkorn University here in Thailand hosts their lecture series in their repository for some of their courses. Also, University of New Mexico hosts in their repository the faculty teaching resources that are in video format. And Concordia Seminary uploads their day lecture series, which dates back from 1960s up to the present. Old Dominion University also hosts video resources such as their presidential lecture series in their own home. All of these examples of video resources that I mentioned are available via video streaming online, but they're also downloadable for offline viewing. And a lot of audiovisual materials in the Digital Commons Network are tucked inside various collections and series, and you really need to dig down within their IRs to find these files. Handful of institutions solve this dilemma by highlighting AV collections on their homepages and main collections hierarchy page. Here in the DePaul University IR, they have separate link for audiovisual materials on their homepage, which really helps the researchers to easily access their files. Same thing with Galileo and University System of Georgia. They put a browse by material type option in their sidebar, which made it easier for users to locate and access audio, video, and image collection of the repository. And Digital Commons sites can also host conferences and events outputs. In my example, in Buklo, they uploaded their event outputs in their iPhones. Some also host Digital Commons in the Digital Commons platform their 3D files and 3D rendered objects. Some of my examples here in Brigham University, in Boise State University, in Lawrence University, as well as in the University of Pennsylvania hosts their 3D collections, which are downloadable STL files. They can download it and 3D print it for them to have also their 3D objects available for them. Okay, and then lastly, for the best practice example, here is a good example from Taylor University in which they recorded their oral history of COVID-19 stories from the members of their academic community. For the issues and risks of managing audiovisual collections in their institutional repositories in the Digital Commons Network, there are some ethical and privacy risks: capturing, creating new data, data sharing and reuse, access issues, digitization and conversion of materials, too much information versus too little information, and lack in empty collections. I will just highlight one or two there. Too much information versus too little information. This seems to be a current issue in IRs. Some repositories have quite a lot of collections in their second and third levels of hierarchy, but this makes it hard for the users to browse specific collections. More problematic is some of these collections do not have contents within those collections, so it's blank or it has no information in them. So it's very confusing for users. And conversely, some do have little information in their top-level hierarchy, so presentation of collections become likewise confusing. For the last part of my presentation, I'll be sharing my recommendations and future course of actions of IR managers who wants to host their AV collections in the repository in the Digital Commons Network. Audiovisual collections are relatively not well represented in the majority of IRs in the Digital Commons Network, and it is really needed that we reach out to IR stakeholders in order to populate it more with varied sources such as audiovisual materials, datasets, and other non-textual materials. IR managers can also reach out to the platform for additional features and tools specific for AV materials such as auto-transcription of videos and built-in accessibility tools in their site. There's also a need to provide better search functionalities specific to audiovisual collections. IR managers also need to develop IR protocols and standards specific to AV collections to standardize data capture and access. Also, UI improvements is welcome in the system-wide Digital Commons site to cater more not just to the text-based materials but also to various types of sources hosted in the repository. And lastly, studies about best practice in AV collection management in IRs outside of the DC network should also be undertaken to determine some of the gradings being done by some of other IR managers. And in summary, the main goal of my study is to establish the importance of AV collections hosted in institutional repositories to the research landscape. Further, availability and representation of AV materials in repositories, databases, online catalogs, and discovery services will provide researchers with valuable sources that are not only static but communicative and full of life, one that provides endless interpretation to those who are willing to look at them. Here are my references, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luis. And next up, we have Dr. Sukanta PATRA. And he's a librarian at Vidyasagar College for Women, Kolkata. And Dr. Patra served to Darfur University as assistant librarian from 2010 to 2020. He is also the guest faculty at the Department of Library and Information Science, Rabindra Bharati University, Kolkata. He also presents at various national institutions across India, and he has published 20 articles with peer-reviewed journals, and he's also a life member of Indian Library Association. And Dr. Patra, all yours.
I'm Dr. Sukanta Kr. My topic is application of FRBR and RDA to audiovisual materials for discoverability and biblical records. In brief of my presentation, functional equivalent for bibliographic records is a conceptual notion of the bibliographic universe to describe the entities, relationship, and attributes associated with the age of the entities and relationships, and it processes a national level bibliographic records for all of the various types of materials. It also reminds us to user tasks that means the finds, identify, select and obtain the records, describing the catalog, bibliographies and other bibliographic tools. The paper also describes the work happening on the FRBR model to the audiovisual materials as a basis for the implementing a fully FRBR complement digital library and archive system. A detailed analysis of FRBR and FRBR entities and attributes is presented for audiovisual materials, description and access of contents on time-based media has been a daunting challenge for many decades. This has been particularly difficult in case of the original and unique moving image and recorded sound materials within the libraries and archives, and are challenging for all users to access. A data model that supports the needs, sound materials within the libraries and archives. So RDA is a set of challenging cataloging instruction based on FRBR and FRAD rate. It could be considered the hierarchical work safety model in that they identify work as the topmost entity applicable to the resource description. In introduction, an audiovisual work composed of sound, sequence and picture or both. AV also include the motion picture, video, audio cassettes, CD, DVDs, etc. And AV should not be confused with multimedia, which may include the several types of AV materials but has the difficult guidelines. The FRBR is a conceptual model of the bibliographic universe to describe the entity's relationship and attributes, that means the metadata associated with the age of the entity's relationship, and which process the national level bibliographic record for all types of various materials. We also remind us the user. In the definition of AV materials, the DIP in 1993 defined them those materials which do not depend on solely open the reading to convey the meaning. The meaning presents the information through the sense of the hearing as an audio resources, sight as the visual resources, or through a combination of sense. That definition pinpoint the wide variety of striking the characteristics. And same as the other two definitions in the Webster Encyclopedia of Unabridged Dictionary, they define the audiovisual aids as a training or educational materials directed at the both of sense of hearing and the sense of sight, film, recording, photographs, etc. used the classroom instruction, library collection, or the like. And what is FRBR and RDA? The FRBR offers us a fresh perspective on the structure and relationship of bibliographic and authority records of universe entity, and the more the precise the vocabulary to help the future cataloging tools maker and system designer to meeting user needs and demand. It is a conceptual model of the bibliographic universe to describe the entities, relationship and attributes that will metadata assume with the age of the relationships. And the IFLA continues to monitor the application of FRBR and promote its user evolution. FRBR is an integration model framed by the IFLA in 1998. The model represents a generalized view of the bibliographic universe. The conceptual model is based on the entity analysis techniques and associated key objects and at the interest to user bibliographic records. The entity relationship structure that derived from the analysis of bibliographic entities, attribute and relationship has been in use FRBR as a framework of the assessment of elements of each attribute and relationship to the tasks of the performed user by the bibliographic data. Now, what is the entity relationship model? In FRBR model, the entity's bibliographic universe has been divided in three groups. The first group includes the product of the intellectual or artistic individual, and second group is the comprised of those entities responsible for the intellectual or artistic content, and the third group is the identifies the entities that serve as the subjects of intellectual or artistic individuals. And group 1 entities and primary relationship. The entities of the group represent the different aspects of user interest of the product of intellectual or artistic individual. These are, first is work. Work means a distinct of intellectual or artistic creation. And second one is expression. What is expression? The intellectual or artistic realization of a work. And manifestation, the physical environment of an expression of a work. And the last item is item, a single example of the manifestation. Such a, in a define, I write a books or any content, that is a work. When I present the main content to the editor or etc., an editor is also edited or defined in content, that is the expression. And after the editing the documents, they send to the publisher or any distributor, and they publish the document. This is the manifestation. And after manifestation is also available in our market, and when the dark materials is contained in archives or in our library, this is the look like items. In the first group, the work, it is realized through that is called as an expression. When expression is embodied in, then it is transferred to the manifestation, and is exemplified by the as a look at item. And group 2 is an entity relationship model. The entities in the second group represent those responsible. That is actually responsible persons, responsible for the intellectual artistic content of the physical production and the dissemination of the custodians of the entities in the first group. The entities in this group include the person or as an individual or as a corporate bodies. And the responsibility relationship is that exists between the entities and the second group, and the entities in the first group may be represented in picture 2. The last and third group, entities and subject responsibilities, relationship. That is the entities of a group represent an additional set of entities that serve the subject of work. It includes the concept. Concept is an abstract of the idea. And the object is a material thing. An event is an action and occurrence, and place a location. Picture 3. And so the subject relationship between the entities in the third group and the work, the entity in the first group, and also the relationship between the work and the entities in the first and second group. The diagram indicates the work may be have its subject one or more than one work, expression and manifestation, item, person, and corporate body. why RDA? RDA is better at the gathering of the digital resources and for the resources with example with multiple characteristics and will provide more guidelines on the creation of audio editing. RDA has developed with the end user in mind. RDA provides a consistent, flexible and extensible framework for the description of all the types of resources, including the digital resources and those with the multiple characteristics. RDA is compatible with the internationally established principle, model and standard. RDA is compatible with the range of the encoding the system such as MODS, doubling code, phonics and MARC. It will allow the library bibliographic records to be integrated with those used by the other metadata communities and to move into the digital environment beyond the library catalog. RDA will enable with the system support and the grouping together the bibliographic records for different edition, translation and other formats of work to archive for more meaningful display of the data for the user. RDA is a web-based product which enables the catalogers to move the video in the related the instruction using the hyperlink and with the integrate their own instruction policies. RDA is the transition of the stepping stone that require all the small changes to the catalog record but the move to the metadata in a catalog closer to the full replacement of the current model. And now the sustainability of the AV materials for access. Libraries have been around the countries and so they are the model for the learning and sharing access of resources. This approach is arguably one of the earliest recorded means for reducing and reusing material. Instead of having the material multiple uses by the individual copies shared of a document, libraries offer the sustainable alternatives where the communities can share access to the same resources. In addition, communal appreciation and the respect for the libraries, they ensure that the practitioner like the good care of the resources they borrow, extending the lifetime of the given resources. And RDA also provides the instruction on the use of the authorized access point to the records of the following types of relationship. What are the relationships? The primary relationship between the manifestation and the word or expression embodied on the manifestation. Relationship between the resources and the person families or corporate bodies associated with that resources. Relationship between the word and the subject. The relationship between the word and expression and manifestation of the idea. And relationship between the person families and the corporate bodies. In addition, RDA provides the guideline to the uses of title measure and the title proper title and the entire relationship as the access point. RDA does not provide the guideline on the use of the other data element as the access point. The agencies using the RDA data may determine which additional element to the index based on the need of the users and the capabilities of their data management system. RDA presentation for the musical work. There are for introduction, there are many chapters in the RDA of the musical work. Chapter A, introduction. Chapter B, titles. Chapter C, the identify the noun part. Chapter D, medium of performance, and chapter E, musical keys and range. Chapter A, dates. Chapter G, person and corporate bodies. Chapter H, the topical and subject. Chapter I, GNB form, and chapter J, geographic area. In Sunday. In the chapter B, the title section, the user discovery and identification of musical work frequently draw on title. Often it is a conjunction with the creator. Particular musical works are often referred to by many different titles as the various languages. For example, the Symphony number 5 Fifth Symphony, the Symphony C-Dur, Symphony option 67, etc. An identified number. The opus, the therapeutic index, and the serial number are the frequently used in the Western art music to identify the musical world. The identity, the system of the exploit the authoritative record data to easily reach the user between the different system of numbering for the composer. Where the multiple words number system exists, in many cases musical words is a distinctive title, and the title only with the types of the musical composition such as the symphony. Medium of performance. The medium performance is an attribute uniquely important to music. It is an identified element for known musical works, and users also the regularly seek words and expression, and for a particular medium of the performance without any the particular work's expression in mind of the beginning of their search. However, historically, the data recording and encoding the standard and practice have not been the medium of the performance that cleanly and consistency of the separation of the other attributes. Musical key in the chapter 20, musical keys and ranges. The original key can be useful for the identify the tonal word of the Western art music. Particularly, the work has the genetic target and the identified number is unknown. The absent from the catalog data or the only non-existent, the edition statement may contain the information on the original key or range. In manifestation, may not identify whether such statement refers to the original key or range or the transposition of from the basic practice to the simply include the actions in the index and display. Date. The chapter 8, that is to mention the date. The creation date of the creation date. Creation date is an important to the access point of the musical work. User may perceive the works composed on the particular date of the might be the specific musical year or decade or the mode before the era of the musical history. Chapter G. The person and corporate bodies. The created by the relationship is a very important for user to find, identify, and select the musical works by a particular composer. Usually, the composer is a single person, or more really, the corporate bodies can serve as a creator. It is important to index and display all the person and the corporate names, both the transcribed form and the standard vocabulary. Once a user has identified a word created by the particular composer, the interface should link the more materials related to the person. When the data, for example, clicking on the link within the record for the work composed by the John Adams composer, that within bracket, that means the Adam John in right as a Adam John in 1947. 1947 is the date of birth of the John Adam, and should locate only the materials related to this person, not item related to the other patient or the other person of the John Adams. Chapter is a generic form. Chapter is the geographic area of the items mentioned there. And the second is the expression and manifestation. There are also the chapter in introduction, chapter B format, chapter C identified number, chapter A D musical presentation, chapter D edition, chapter A language, chapter G medium of performance, chapter A is musical key range, I date, and J person corporate bodies, and chapter K is geographic area. And other aspect of musical discovery, there is also the chapter A, introduction, chapter B, authority records, chapter C, compilations, chapter D, searching, alphabetical records, keywords, and enhancement, chapter third-party content, and musical specific view, chapter A. In the conclusion, the discovery has become a library approach toward, but it's different to a traditional concept that enabling the user to find the information and materials. Discovery was the first facility of the pinpoint index and card catalog, when then the latter of the online library catalog and search engine. Today, the discovery environment is changing rapidly both within the libraries and externally. Within the libraries, there is the FRBR, RTA discovery tools and the facilitate the browsing are the key factors related to those challenges in the way of our navigation, search and encounter of the library data. The newest discovery interface aims to remove the barrier between the different types of data and incorporate the aspect of the non-library online searching environment familiar to users. When the discovery interface the work well, everyone benefited. And the library collections are the more fully exposed, and the user does not have the struggle with the shortcoming and the compilation, the startup problems and strategies that discovery is optimized. This is the difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Patra. I think right now we have the presentation from Zoom. Yeah. And there are two presenters, and they are Nick Tierberger and Amanda Harris. Just going to read their bio. Nick is concerned to make language materials secure and reusable both for speakers of the language and for current and future researchers. He set up the Pilbara Aboriginal Language Centre in 1988 and then moved to Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies to create the Aboriginal Studies Electronic Data Archive in 1991. He worked at the Vanuatu Cultural Centre in mid-1990s and wrote a grammar of Nafsan from Efate in the late 1990s, followed by a dictionary published in 2021. When doing that research, he developed a method for creating and exploring a linguistic media corpus that allow all examples to be cited to primary recordings. And this led him to work as part of a team to establish a digital archive, the Pacific and Regional Archive for Digital Sources in Endangered Cultures, PARADISEC, in 2003. And he set up the archive Kai Puleho Hone at the University of Hawaii in 2008. And that is Nick. And now we have Amanda. Amanda is an ARC Future Fellow at Sydney Conservatorium of Music, University of Sydney. And he's also the director of the Sydney Unit of Digital Archive at PARADISEC. And Amanda is interested in hearing the voices of those often excluded from conventional music histories through collaborative research focused on gender and intercultural musical cultures. And her monograph representing Australian Aboriginal music and dance 1930 to 1970 was published by Bloomsbury Publishing in 2020, and the book Music, Dance and the Archive, co-edited with Linda Barwick and Jacqueline Troy, was published by Sydney University Press in 2022. And they are ready on Zoom, and we're gonna, it's a recording. We're gonna hear them and their presentation.
I'd like to talk to you today about the project PARADISEC, which is the Pacific and Regional Archive for Digital Sources in Endangered Cultures. And specifically today, our title is Archiving Communities and New Technologies in PARADISEC, Improving Access to Recordings in Pacific Languages. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and Amanda Harris, who's the director of the PARADISEC unit in Sydney. PARADISEC is a joint project between universities of Melbourne, Australian National University, and the University of Sydney. And I want to begin by acknowledging that I'm on unceded Aboriginal land and pay my respects to Aboriginal people, past and present. Why do we need to improve access to recordings in Pacific languages? These are typically what we could call under-resourced languages, and they have very little representation on the web. They may be mentioned by name, but if you try and find any material in those languages, it's impossible or extremely difficult to find any. There's just not very much available there. So these records provide an important recognition and validation of these small cultural groups. We think that we can improve access to these descriptions if people remember who the participants are and can interpret what is being said. So the more we can publicize recordings that we have and try and find people who understand them, the more we can enrich the record by making transcripts and improving the metadata. And we've also seen that these recordings can be used in the revitalization of performances that may no longer be undertaken, or indeed of languages themselves. PARADISEC was established 20 years ago. It was established by researchers who were concerned to make these recordings accessible. And these were recordings made in many languages of the region around Australia, some also in Australia. But these recordings were sitting in the offices of researchers who had retired or who had died. And nobody was taking responsibility for looking after these recordings. It wasn't part of the job of the National Library of Australia or the National Film and Sound Archive and so on. So we began working on digitizing these tapes and then creating a catalogue of those recordings, which exposes the existence of those recordings. Over time, we've digitized about 7,000 hours and then had a lot of born digital material. So the total is about 16,000 hours of audio in the collection, representing 1,350 different languages. And some of the examples of kinds of tapes that we're talking about. Stephen Vorm was a professor of linguistics at the Australian National University and had recorded material in many different languages, but specifically big collections in languages of the Solomon Islands, and these were sitting in his deceased estate. Similarly with Arthur Capel, many field notes and also audio recordings. And you can see there many of these recordings come from Papua New Guinea, Ireland, Melanesia, and some from Indonesia. And more recently, we've been working with cultural centres. So you'll see at the end there, the Solomon Islands National Museum, Vanuatu Cultural Centre, and the Yap State Archives. What I want to do is play you some samples of these recordings, so it's not all me talking. Just to see the kinds of materials that we have. And this one's interesting because the tape box said that the language was Kwaanua, but we have a speaker of Kwaanua working in the PARADISEC office, Stephen Gagau, and he couldn't identify that language. But anyway, have a listen to this.
Inde na mga ni bongore mo ya to ha de bo na no byo nga de bai yo all of them no ni mbo ujin fa mo nga no na luja.
You can see the quality of the recording is quite good. We also put a lot of effort into capturing it at the best, with using the best equipment possible. We have had over 40,000 downloads in the last 4 years of material in the collection. 23,000 people used our catalogue in 49,000 sessions. And importantly, a lot of this, not the majority, but there are significant numbers coming from the target areas that we are interested in. So from Vanuatu, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and so on. The tapes we're talking about are often just left as tapes, as you can see there. This is an archival holding of the tapes in an archival box. And then if we look at some of these tapes, we can see that they're not necessarily in good condition. On the right, you can see a tape covered in mold, and this requires a bit of work to make it playable. And so we're caught between the senescence of the analog, that is the aging analog tapes, and the evanescence, that is the tendency to disappear of digital files, and the need to take care in how you look after the digital files as well. Because we know that there is this deadline 2025 that's been noted by specialists in tape technology, who say that we only have a couple of years left to digitize tapes before the tapes themselves become unplayable. And you can see on the right that image of the tape that's shedding its magnetic media as it goes through the tape recorder, tape player. And so we have a project which is trying to identify tapes, and it's a questionnaire where we ask people to tell us if they have tape collections, and then we try to find funding to digitize those collections. For those moldy tapes, one of the things that can be done is to bake them at a very low temperature in a vacuum oven. So that's what we have here in our Sydney office. Extracts all the moisture and re-adheres to some extent the magnetic media onto the polyester backing. We also have a cassette lubrication machine. This was built by Sam King and Doug Smith, and it's the only one we know of in Australia for tapes that we have that can't be played. So when you put them into the cassette player, what you have is screeching and terrible noise. But once they're lubricated, they can be played again. And the blog post that I point to there has a sample that you can listen to of an audio signal before and after the cassette has been cleaned. We work with cultural agencies in the region. We're very concerned that they be partners in all of this work. And we do that so that we can return materials to those cultural centres, because we're not in a position to return tapes to the villages where they were recorded. It's just too much work, too difficult for us to do. But if we can at least get the recordings to cultural centres in the capital cities, that's some way towards making them accessible locally. As I said, these tapes are typically made by linguists, musicologists, anthropologists in the past, who use them for their own research. And then because of the way that academia works, there was no prestige or reward given to anybody for archiving materials. That was always an extra burden, and which is very unfortunate. And I think that's changing now, that we're now trying to emphasize the importance of primary records and citability of primary records in research. The cultural agencies in our region typically do not have playback machines, and they don't have good ways of fixing and cleaning tapes and so on, as we saw is required if we want to get signals off some of these old tapes. So we've worked with these agencies. We've digitized hundreds of tapes with the Vanuatu Cultural Centre. We've worked with the University of New Caledonia, the Chibau Centre, Institute of Papua New Guinea Studies, the Divine Word University. We've digitized hundreds of tapes with them, the Solomon Islands National Museum, and the University of French Polynesia. And we continue to build these connections, and we still digitize tapes for the Solomons and Vanuatu Cultural Centre. We're doing that at the moment. Another collection we finished just recently was the Yap State Archive. So there you can see boxes of tapes, hundreds of tapes. We tried to get funding from the Endangered Language Documentation Program, Legacy Materials Grants, to digitize these tapes, but they declined our application. So we got a small grant from the UNESCO Memory of the World Committee, $5,000, which actually didn't cover the cost. It probably covered a third of the cost of of digitizing cleaning and digitizing all of these tapes. And you can see on the right one of the worst tapes, and that required quite a bit of work of snipping and re-adhering the tapes and splicing them together and so on. Solomon Islands National Museum, here you can see their office is festooned with tapes all around the shelves, and they don't have a playback machine. A lot of these are reel-to-reel tapes. They have no reel-to-reel playback machine. So we've been slowly working to digitize these tapes, and we did get an Endangered Archives Program grant to digitize 200 tapes with the museum. And this is very important for us, is to maintain these links and connections. On the top left, you can see the tape collection at the Vanuatu Cultural Centre. They estimate in the order of 5,000 tapes that need to be digitized. In the top middle, you can see tapes being returned to the cultural centre there. It's Umbong Thompson on the left, who is the audio officer in charge of the collections there. And on the bottom right, you can see Ton Hearoke, who was the director of the Solomon Islands National Museum at the time. And so on. We keep finding these collections, and we hope to keep finding them into the future so that they can be preserved. Here's another recording. It's a bit loud, so I'm sorry if it sounds a bit harsh, but it's kids talking, and let's listen to that. Our catalogue is online. Anybody can consult the catalogue there. It's the way that we build up the metadata for the collections, and we structure it by having collections that have items, and items have files. The catalogue does a lot of important structuring for us. We have standard drop-down menus for language codes, for countries, and for roles. So these all conform to international metadata standards. And this allows us then to export the metadata from the catalogue with APIs that are picked up by a range of different services. So for example, the National Library of Australia picks up our catalogue, and we can search through their catalogue to find material in the PARADISEC collection. Similarly, Research Data Australia is another service that picks up our API and distributes the information there. The Virtual Language Observatory, which is based in the Netherlands, also has material from our collections from an API feed. And the Open Language Archives Community, which is an international initiative to support language archives specifically. What they do is they harvest material from they harvest metadata from each language archive every day. And that URL that you see at the bottom has a 3-letter code. That's the ISO 6393 language code. And for every language in the world, if you use that URL and put your 3-letter code at the end, it will show you all the material that's available for that language in language archives around the world, which is a fantastic service. All of these things go to making our material as accessible as possible. In 2013, we established what we call the Lost and Found Survey with our colleagues in Delaman, which is the Digital Endangered Language and Music Archives Network. This survey is online, and we periodically publicize the fact that it's there, and we ask people to fill it in. And here are some examples of collections that have responded to that archive, and we have since been able to digitize the recordings. So you can see there we have recordings from Vanuatu, Papua New Guinea, North Africa, and again, these would not have been digitized, and they were at risk of being lost. Once we have the items in the collection, we try and treat the collection as a dialogic archive. That is an archive which encourages feedback and enriching the information in the catalogue. And on the left, you can see Stephen Gagao, who works in our Sydney office, Talai Man, who has been going through the various collections from Papua New Guinea and island Melanesia and adding more information to the catalogue. Something we experimented with on the right is working with the Divine Word University in Madang in Papua New Guinea. Having digitized their tapes, we made them available as MP3 files, which they played at a local market, and then asked people to give them any feedback. And then they put that information into a spreadsheet, which we were able to add to the catalogue. We've been running for 20 years, and what we've done is built automated processes so that when we don't have much funding, because we go through periodic funding troughs and what we call it drought and flooding rain, that is, sometimes we have lots of funding and sometimes we don't, so that we can run the processes for the collection with minimal staff. So with new items, the depositor fills out a deposit form and it specifies access conditions. They can fill out the metadata spreadsheet, or they can use a tool that we've collaborated in building called Lameta. And Lameta is a tool which looks at directories on your laptop and allows you to build collections based on those directories and describe them, and then export that in a form that can be imported into various language archive catalogues. The files are uploaded into our system and they're checked. They're checked for file naming consistency and the file structure itself. And we then put them through a series of steps to get into our collection. And we convert uncompressed files, which are obviously the archival form, into delivery formats as well. So the very high resolution WAV, TIFF and MXF files get transcoded down to deliverable formats. So once material's been deposited, it can be online and available the same day or shortly afterwards. So this allows us to keep operating with minimal funding. The catalogue is freely visible to the world. Some items are marked as private and not visible to anyone except the depositor and the admins. Registered users have access to any item with open access. So depositors can assign access to other registered users for items that are otherwise closed or private. So a private item is essentially a sand pit in which you're creating your sandbox, in which you're creating your collections. And you can keep them private as long as you want. But once they're marked as being not private, they're assigned a digital object identifier, and they become visible through all of those search mechanisms that I showed you earlier. One of the things we've worked quite hard on is getting materials back to their source. And as I said, we do that typically by going to local cultural centres. And we can put files on hard disks and send them back, which is one way of doing this. We make our catalogue as accessible and findable as possible and make low resolution copies for delivery. But there's a problem of providing context for a set of files. If you return files on a hard disk, it's very difficult for the receiving organisation to know what's on those files. So we've been exploring the use of small collections, arbitrary sets of files from our catalogue being delivered. So for example, all of the files related to Tahiti, going to Tahiti so people there can access them. And we have a way of extracting those files, putting them onto a hard disk or a Raspberry Pi, which is a low-powered web server with a Wi-Fi transmitter. And we've written a service then called Data Loader that converts the files from the format in our collection into an HTML catalog for just that collection on the hard disk or the Raspberry Pi. We've done this and delivered it in various places. Here is an example of Iroquois village where the Raspberry Pi is running and people are accessing data in their language on their mobile phones. Now, usually people have mobile phones in this region, the Pacific. Not so many have computers. So delivering files in this way is probably more appropriate. And we are currently planning to have Raspberry Pis 4 local cultural centres available for them, and they can then just advertise the fact that people can come into the cultural centre and access these files on their phones. A big problem for collections of legacy recordings is that they're not transcribed, and often there's very little metadata. So you can't search that kind of material. And we've got, 16,000 hours of audio and 3,000 hours of video, much of which is not transcribed. So we've been working with colleagues on a project for automated speech recognition, which they call ELPIS. This allows you to use a small set of material that is transcribed as a training set, and then you submit that training set to this tool, which creates a language model, and that can be applied to other material in that language. So we've done this in an experimental way with small amounts of language material, and what we are planning is to see how this works at scale. That is, just applying it to a lot of different recordings and seeing what sort of results we can get. And we figure if we can get 50% accuracy, then at least we're getting some kind of point of entry to recordings that otherwise are completely untranscribed. Here's another recording. You can see that was recorded in the 1970s in Vanuatu. The quality of the recording itself was good, but the capture from the tape was also very high quality. So that's an excellent recording quality there. So what we've done in PARADISEC is we've structured all this material into accessible collections, having digitized tapes that were at risk. We create daily backups of this collection in different cities. We have one backup in Melbourne, and the main collection is in Brisbane in Queensland. We do a daily check of item consistency. That is, we do a checksum of random items in the collection. We've also been able to do emergency disaster recovery. So we go back to the backups and recover files just to be sure that the backup actually is backing up what it says it's backing up. We have this automated ingestion of new files, which allows us to put material into the collection very quickly and make it accessible very quickly, and also with all the licensing and permissions in place, so that we're confident that it's being dealt with appropriately. We do use a takedown principle, so even if the depositor has put certain conditions on recordings, we can't always be sure that the recordings contain material that should be made public. So we rely on people to let us know, and we will take that material down. In 20 years of operating, we've never had anybody ask us to take material down, and we've always had the opposite experience. That is, people are really excited to find something in their language. The project really tries to maximize accessibility and to provide long-term security by writing the metadata that's in the catalogue into the items themselves. So for each item in our collection, we write a textual version of the metadata, so a complete view of all the metadata available for that item is stored in textual format with the files on disk, so that the collection is self-describing. It doesn't need the catalogue or the database. One of the problems that we've seen in the past is that collections like this can be orphaned because the catalogue database is lost. We use a format called Research Object Crate, which is a standard for encoding the text using JSON linked data. And we think that this is a fruitful way forward. It allows the collection then to be interrogated in itself, and you can search items within the collection because everything is exposed within the collection as text files, and they can be searched, which isn't the case when things are mediated by a database. The most important aspect of all of this work is the continued collaboration with local cultural agencies and our attempts to support them in their work of recording and preserving materials in their own languages and cultures. Thanks very much, and we'll be happy to take any questions.
Served as the head of media preservation at the University of Illinois, I believe, since 2011. He was hired to start the libraries, first formalized the preservation program at the University of Illinois Libraries, and George received degrees in anthropology, archaeology, and history from Miami University, Ohio, and has over 25 years experience working in the preservation and conservation of museum, archive, and cultural heritage materials, and has previously held roles at the Smithsonian Institution and National Geographic Society. And Joshua has been involved with SEAPAVAA since 2005 and is serving his second term as treasurer.
Hello, can you hear me? Hear me okay? Okay, thank you so much for this long session. So thank you for staying awake for this. The previous. Do that. That previous presentation on PARADISEC was a really great introduction to what I'm going to talk about. And it's actually very inspirational what they've done with what they've had to work with. They're focusing on a specific type of material, oral, language materials, and what I'm going to talk about is largely revolves around film collections. So it's kind of that was a really good, these are really two good presentations to go together. The challenges facing long-term preservation of visual material held on analog carriers is now extensively documented. I think we all know what the problems are. We have degradation of physical carriers, exacerbated by lack of storage, obsolescence of playback equipment, difficulties with collection assessments, are just a few challenges faced by archives globally. A steep learning curve for working with digitized analog materials and technological infrastructure, presenting even greater barriers to staff entrusted with the care of AV materials. These issues are intensified in the Pacific due to the multiple multitude of realities that island inhabitants face in daily life. Pacific nations face challenges not found in other regions. The immense distances from each other and from major markets, high transportation costs, scarcity of land, limited natural resources, force islands to import more than they export, and so most rely heavily on foreign aid. Additionally, threats posed by climate change put ecologically fragile Pacific nations at the highest risk. It's some of the highest risks on Earth. Jump ahead a few. Due to the increase in natural disaster brought about by climate change, 5 Pacific nations are found in the top 20 nations from the 2019 World Risk Index, with Vanuatu, Tonga, and the Solomon Islands occupying spots 1, 2, and 4, respectively. Technologically, the difficulty and expense of connecting the vastly spread out islands have left many in the Pacific with widely varying levels of internet capacity and electricity. Many areas receive little to no stable connection. In addition, unstable governments and ineffective government systems exacerbate the issues of many nations still marred by the effects of colonization. And in my talk, I'm going to look specifically at areas of Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia, which is a gigantic area. So I think, as all of us know, and it's well known to all of us, a distinct definition of film archive and film archiving has never really truly come to being. Our own Ray Edmondson, long ago, way back in 1995, laid this out, stating that there's no ready-made work universally understood to describe institutions which preserve movie images and sound recordings, or the people that work there. Archive is simply one of the words appropriated from the 1930s on to do that job, maybe because of its popular meaning as a place where old materials are kept. I think this still holds true today. Under that umbrella term exists a diverse set of unique specialties that does not specifically encompass a standardized set of practices or professional codes. Again, I think this is true now more than ever as the diversity of technology and thinking going in all sorts of directions make this job even harder. So the historic construct of the archives in the Pacific is, of course, a Western discipline, described by David Hanlon in 1999 as a byproduct of the lingering chill of colonialism. The dichotomy between the chill of colonialism and the warmth of the Pacific regions is really interesting. How much more so is it for the nebulous discipline of film archiving? When we examine archiving of Pacific films, it is truly of the Pacific films themselves, not in the Pacific as a geographic location. Historically, very few films have been made by Pacific Islanders themselves, and categorizing and recognizing the national regional cinema in the Pacific, as Meyer described in 1997, has proved difficult. Whether fictional films or those that claim to document reality ethnographically, as Haraneko explained in 1999, that Pacific Islanders merely provide colorful backgrounds in tropical settings, which to those who live in cold industrial countries are the equivalent of Eden or paradise. For this reason, immeasurable amounts of film and audiovisual materials are held outside the Pacific, often buried deep in far-flung archives, museums, research offices, and travelers' basements. As a case in point, take for example the preservation and restoration of Robert Flaherty's 1926 Moana, often identified as the first docufiction in history. Moana documents and tells a story centered around traditional ways of life as practiced on the Samoan island of SEAPAVAA. The 2014 restoration of these works took curator Ruth Posner and others on a global search for existing film elements that survived in numerous institutions across Europe, the United States, and even some close by in New Zealand. This provides a typical example in which traditional film archiving largely occurs outside of a region. It involves collections filmed on islands by outsiders and held in far-flung archives well removed in time and space. In this case, it was fortunate that multiple elements had actually been saved, had actually been preserved. At least they were in storage, in a okay storage. So the same cannot be said about much of the media produced in the Pacific. There's a diversity of institutions practicing some form of film archiving in the Pacific. Within this region, as in many parts of the world, audiovisual materials are held by a wide range of institutions. Nothing different here. Archives, libraries, museums, cultural organizations, research centers. In addition, a substantial and growing number of television and radio broadcasters, production companies, filmmakers, and other media creators operate across the island. The advent, like many places, the advent of digital technology has really increased the local production world. Several institutions hold significant and relatively well-supported AV productions in the Francophone specifically. Yet one of the few, if not the only dedicated audiovisual archives is located in Tahiti at the French Polynesian Archive Service, and is known as the Audiovisual Archive Heritage Service. They maintain a dedicated media and film storage with some environmental controls within an archival facility which is actually well situated on high ground above the local flood zones of Papiete. They even have an on-site audiovisual preservation laboratory, which may be, although I'm not sure, is the only one in the entire Pacific. And it's very difficult for them to do their work there. In fact, the guy who does their work smokes cigarettes still while he's doing his work. So, but they're doing some great stuff, best they can. Two institutions which may be known by a few of you in here provide a glimpse of an all-too-common situation faced across the Pacific. The National Film Institute of Papua New Guinea, located in the Eastern Highlands town of Goroka, contains a sizable film and audio-video collection documenting Papua New Guinea's rich and diverse cultural heritage. The long-neglected films were moved to this area due to the hospitable climate, but fire tragically destroyed the institute in 1998, burning many of the films made by PNG's first filmmakers. In direct communication with Sukanta Kr, who was the director there, she stated that the archive receives no direct funding, has no technical expertise or experience in preservation, archive management, fundraising, or policy writing. 3,100 kilometers away to the east lies the Kiribati National Library and Archives. Now, we somehow remember sitting only in this is the national repository for the nation of 32 atolls spread across 3.5 million square kilometers. Sitting only an average of 2 meters above sea level, the nation is highly vulnerable to the effects of rising seas, increased tropical storms, and drought. The archive cites a lack of any knowledge of handling and preservation of film and AV materials, including limited and inadequate physical space. All too common as well is a lack of awareness from locals and governments regarding the importance of media materials. Because many Pacific archives are in a similar situation, physical conservation and preservation through transfer to digital formats has occurred sporadically. Even those that have some amount of financial resources are burdened by the expense and difficulty in obtaining supplies and maintaining physical spaces in tropical climates. Some projects have successfully been done, including some of the amazing work we saw by PARADISEC, but specifically film and video, the National Archives of Fiji, Cook Islands, TV, broadcast, as well as the Samoa Broadcasting Corporation have done some amounts of work, and the National Film and Salle Archive of Australia and FSA have been aiming some work towards broadcasters in Tonga and Samoa, but have had trouble, mostly with COVID. The difficulties brought about by COVID did spur some dedicated effort efforts toward revisiting collections. The La Maison de la Culture in Tahiti, back to Tahiti, ambitiously managed to create an online presence for a selection of their live performance archives in order to fill a void created by the suspension of activities during the pandemic. A network of regional cultural heritage institutions, such as SEAPAVAA, have managed to a relative degree of success in establishing training events in the region for the past 30 years or more. Despite the best intended efforts, vital education training has often occurred in fits and spurts. This fragmentary and irregular style of preservation and one-off trainings will not be an adequate approach to address the impending crisis facing these AV collections, particularly those held on magnetic media, which they're mostly all aware of. In addition, it's very difficult to assess training outcomes once attendees return to their institutions. There are certainly reasons for this, such as the lack of consistent dedicated funding for programmatic long-term strategies with clear and concise goals. A change in this approach must be considered as institutions face a dire future. So, as I mentioned, from ethnographic and scientific accounts to travel films, feature films, even court proceedings, the legacy of colonialism, research, and tourism have left a number of unknown levels of films outside of the Pacific. There's a significant knowledge gap here regarding the situation in many of these institutions. We just don't know what exists, to what depth, and where. And an example is seen in a associated project by New Clark and McNewham in 2015, which was the Pacific Audiovisual Archive Specific Audiovisual Preservation Needs Analysis. 17 institutions were surveyed in this really extensive document, with in-person visits to 12 archives in 5 countries. However, 80% of the organizations were part of national and governmental bodies. When I spoke with broadcast executives, filmmakers, and producers, so outside governmental agencies, at the FIFO Film Festival in 2018, prevailing sentiment was that archiving and preservation had rarely, if ever, even been thought of, and many didn't even know what we were talking about. Even if titles themselves are identified, physical holdings are rarely known or extremely difficult to assess. Last updated in 2011, the Moving Images of the Pacific Islands, a guide to films and videos, is the most recent of a series of guides produced by the Center for Pacific Island Studies at the University of Hawaii. Although it contains over 3,600 entries, excluding Hawaii and Western style institutions, the lack of updated information or anybody associated with this is not available, or not retired, or not working on this anymore. The majority of films in this titles are significantly considered orphan films without any known or obtainable copyright holder, or which are neglected for lack of commercial value. Without knowledge of archival holdings or ownership, many of these orphan titles will likely suffer a bleak future. It is simply unknown where film and native documents are held, and what quantities and in what condition. These gaps are due in part to the absence of adequate financial resources needed to focus on AV materials. A fact that will allow large swaths of Pacific audiovisual heritage to degrade in obscurity. Small staffs and adequate funding do not allow for many activities out there. As many of us know, regardless of any archive work, a lot of times we can't do anything outside of our essential duties. Most collections are not well described or even inventoried. Detailed catalogs are few, far between, limited by technology materials I described earlier. One of the known online catalogs is maintained by the ADCK SEAPAVAA Cultural Center in New Caledonia. So in the future, and as you mentioned earlier, the word collaboration, cooperation, we use it all the time. We try to figure out ways how we can do these things. But it's has to be the foundation of language preservation in the Pacific Indian Belt. No institution can do this barely, anyone can do this on their own. PARADISEC, as we saw earlier, an institution that's working together. But the Pacific needs analysis that McNew and Dave Clark did a few years ago recommended that cooperation between well-organized institutions and small collections on national and regional levels needs to be encouraged and intensified. The report suggests identifying key stakeholders to assist with national and regional initiatives. Clearly, organizations such as SEAPAVAA and SFA, Archives New Zealand, PARADISEC would be likely sources to spearhead these efforts. We're enhancing communication in the near term and developing and organizing a programmatic approach. I think an excellent example of this can be seen in the work that's been done over the past few years in South America, with the establishment of what's called the Ibero-American Network for Digital Preservation and Sound and Audiovisual Archives, almost as much of a mouthful as SEAPAVAA, whose goals are stated as the identification, analysis, discussion, generation, visibility, and dissemination of sustainable preservation alternatives of the sound and audiovisual collection of the region's archives. This type of coordinated approach would make sense in the Pacific and would help ensure a collective approach to challenges and solutions tailored to the Pacific's unique needs. One of the advantages that South America has, for the most part, is a common language, which makes it a lot more easier. But in order to close the knowledge gap, it is crucial to gather more information on collections existing inside and outside the Pacific. The awareness of the existence of these collections would go a long way in helping locate potential partners and create connections between various organizations. While exhaustive surveys and analysis are really exercises, they are neither financially feasible nor practical in a sector where preservation action needs to occur soon. Back to the FIFO television symposium in 2018, as we learned through workshops about what archiving actually is, they said that even just a directory of who holds some type of media and its availability would be helpful, especially for filmmakers and new productions. And I think the broadcast area is really where a lot of this needs to be looking, because they're always looking for stories, always looking for new material, and connecting to other archives across the Pacific is a goal that they would like to do. While many of the existing issues with film and analog media and preservation are known, of course it must be stressed the importance of the preservation of audiovisual material held in magnetic tape-based media. Institutions need to make these collections their highest priority. The recently completed UNESCO EASA global survey, known as the Magnetic Tape Alert Project, brings to light the immensity of the situation, with its survey of over 300 institutions from a wide range of collecting institution types. 5 Pacific institutions in Papua New Guinea, Senyaman Islands, Cook Islands, Niue, and Samoa responded to the survey. Evidence that a portion of these institutions in the region are aware of the potentially catastrophic loss of content due to obsolescence of magnetic media. An area of possible collaboration exists within physical preservation or digitization. While the capacity can be found in a few corners of the the world. Available equipment, technical infrastructure, and practical knowledge makes the proposition of performing in-house digitalization highly unlikely. Some straightforward formats, such as compact cassette tapes, can be set up in small workstations and staff trainings, but the reality is that services provided by audio-visual labs outside the region would be necessary. As there are no known facilities within the Pacific, this presents an enormous challenge. But as I mentioned before, successful projects have been accomplished. Dan Smart, who is supposed to be here, but I don't think they're here, worked with the National Archives of Fiji to do film preservation, and the stabilization of film and digitization of magnetic media must take priority as the NFSA's deadline 2025 collections of tourists stated. Move faster. One of the keys to a strategic plan for the long-term preservation of audiovisual assets would be the realization and utilization of future technologies. While digital access is still lacking through the Pacific, there are reasons to be optimistic about that heritage institutions will be able to expand their digital capabilities and leverage technology to their advantage. Digital storage presents a good example. Whether digitally migrated analog items or digital media, the long-term storage, stewardship, and preservation of digital materials needs to be addressed. Recently extended undersea cable networks, the potentials of mobile 5G technology, and the rapid growth and expansion of the cloud services in recent years have changed the way that many approach these challenges. And work is being done and has been done in these areas, such as the ETC's work on preserving digital audiovisual assets. But of course, training is still necessary here, so let's do this, including way back when with our friend from Tuvalu. But providing digital means for access to trainings is essential. Webinars, pre-recorded training, self-paced learning modules provide much needed and valuable support to personnel. The Pacific Needs Assessment supplies several examples of topics that lend themselves to remote delivery, so things that can be spread among the whole entire community, not just one thing from one institution. And so I'm going to finish up here by stating that wide-ranging institutions need to create this community. Collaborative partnerships need to be multidimensional and encompass heritage institutions, charitable foundations, associations, and private entities. Public-private partnerships should be sought inside and outside of the cultural heritage community. And I think a big lesson that we learned from film festivals and solidifying relationships with film festivals as a platform for engagement, advocacy, and outreach among potential partners. Film festivals are growing bigger all the time. Pacific-related film festivals are becoming increasingly popular. Organizations such as SEAPAVAA need to be on the front lines of this and look for money in the places. So I'm going to just kind of wrap up that I've gone through a lot here, but the collaboration is going to have to be the key, and the difficulties in working in the Pacific are not to be overstated. So thank you so much. That's a lot.
Thanks, Joshua. Okay, we're gonna have some questions and answers. I think we have maybe 10 minutes. While Sanjay is setting up Zoom for Nick and Amanda to also join us. All right. Anyone? Questions for any of the presenters this morning? Do you have a question?
I just wanted to mention, Joshua showed an image in his presentation of the National Film Institute in Goroka in Papua New Guinea. We've been very lucky in the last week and a half in Australia to host Michelle Baru and her colleague Zoe with us, doing some training and capacity building around preservation of all of their collection, but film in particular. And I can confirm it is in a dire state, and it's a very challenging set of circumstances. But one question I wanted to put back to the members of SEAPAVAA is, what is the best way that organisations like the Film and Sound Archive in Australia can assist our colleagues in the Pacific and elsewhere? So Michelle and Zoe have come to Canberra, they're spending 2 weeks with us, we're taking them through a range of training. We're also developing audiovisual online training components that we hope will be ready in the next 6 to 9 months. But we'd really like to hear from people what would be the most useful resource and what is the most useful way to deliver that. Is it face-to-face? Is it online? Is it a combination of both? Are there particular areas of interest? Are there particular areas of technical training? So please, if you're in an organisation where you think that training would be beneficial, please get in contact with us and let us know what you want and what would be useful, because we might be able to produce some material that is helpful. But certainly we're having a great time with Michelle and Zoe. They are so determined, and so their perseverance is amazing. So we look forward to doing more of that work.
We have a response.
Thank you. I'm Christopher Jess from New Caledonia. So I guess maybe I'm the only person from the Pacific Islands here. I'm the stubborn one. And so what we need a lot. Talking from New Caledonia, which is we're quite lucky as compared to other islands because we have facilities and stuff. But in our law, audiovisual archiving was not organized or thought about as compared to libraries and other aspects of archival work. But what we need basically is, of course, training. We need also technical advice, because we have facilities, but we need technical advice on what we should do, how we should do things. I think face-to-face is best. We're lucky to be quite close, actually, with direct flights to Australia, so we'd be more than happy to welcome people as we've done before, and maybe SEAPAVAA would be a good occasion to do it if we were, for instance, to host a conference in the future. Again. But of course we need all of this, but we need to build our own strategy first, I think. And of course, like I said, it will be part of the discussion, but it's more like state to state, or well, state, okay, country to country. So there's politics inside of this. But I would say first we need training, basic training for the first how to deal with audiovisual material that we already hold. And technical advice. I think that's the main objectives for us now, apart from what we have to do with ourselves. And of course, if I may add, we had a proposition by the LSA to actually digitize material. Yes, for urgent needs and very endangered material, that could be a priority also if we develop a partnership.
Hi, hello. First of all, thank you all for the great presentations. And Matthew from New York University, and this question is for Rebecca. My question is, could you share the evaluation process in selecting Curio? And second, do you have advice for archives who are looking to take advantage of AI technologies in selecting a software like Curio?
Thank you. And I apologise, my hearing is not good, so I'm getting assistance. The process for choosing Curio happened a couple of years ago. So in terms of the products, we looked at a range of products that were available at the time. I can pull out some information for you about the key things. It's probably something I can provide to you in terms of what we were looking for. But the key things were the speech-to-text, the optical character recognition, and the facial recognition, and a system that could work off our access files. So for us, the access files are not preservation files, they're smaller and lower resolution. There are a lot of similar systems, excuse me, and more systems on the market. So happy to have a conversation later on about the actual kind of technical criteria that we used. It's perhaps something I can send to you.
Any other questions or response? Is Christoph really the only one from Pacific today? Oh, there you go.
Sorry, this is for Rebecca as well. Thank you for sharing. I'm interested in finding out how long it took for the machine learning process, and especially when it comes to the recognition of landmarks and places, visual recognition, as well as audio recognition when it comes to accents and dialects.
Yes. So you're asking about recognition of physical landmarks, so geographical features. Machine learning can do that. The system that we purchased wasn't designed to do that, but there are other people in other fields and areas who are looking at exactly that feature. So it's something that you can talk to developers about. Because it's machine learning, it's all about how you can implement what is recognisable. So to give you an indication on faces, we have had people come to us and they provide us with about 20 different images of their face in different ages, different hairstyles. We can provide that to Curio, it forms a model, and then it will find that face. So it's never seen that face before. The same principle applies to physical locations and monuments, but you need to teach it to do that. I think audio was the other dialect. So this is an interesting question for who is developing machine learning and artificial intelligence, because it requires teaching. So it's easier or more cost-effective in English at the moment because that's the most common, a reasonably common language that machines have been taught. There is character recognition being developed across all different languages, but again, it's a little bit harder to find developers who are looking at particular dialects or particular languages. It's just not common yet. I think it will be over time as the technology becomes easier to access, but at the moment it is definitely skewed to the most common languages.
I'm just going to make one quick comment on what Christoph said based on what we talked about the trainings. I think it's a really good point that as much as we want to do web remote things, so much of this has to be in person. I mean, You know, there are certain things that cross the board, but somebody who works with students, you teach. We all know this, and anybody working in our film archiving or any other type of archiving, say this is how you do it, and then the second film you look at is completely different. So, and unfortunately, that's of course the most expensive, the most difficult. But I think that aspect of training and especially the technological side is so important. But that's why I think it would be really great for, say, SEAPAVAA and FSA organizations to, and of course, and Nick, I'd love to actually like to hear how he approaches some of the training directly with these institutions in the Pacific.
Nick, we're wondering whether you would like to comment on the challenges of using technology for, in your example, you said Pacific languages were quite potentially, they're languages that are under revival, and perhaps getting technology is a problem.
So I think we have run out of time. If you have any other questions or response or comments, you know who they are, and please talk to them. And thank you for coming to session 1A. And I thank you, Nick, for joining us on Zoom. And see you after lunch.